I've reviewed, and to this day continue to use, many of NuPhy's mechanical keyboards from their high-profile Halo and low-profile Air lineups. As I've said before, they're designed for somebody who wants the mechanical feel without the hassle of tuning internal foams, plates, and mounting styles. Basically, you can modify switches and keycaps, but the cases are sealed with snap locks because you aren't supposed to be poking around inside of them, which has been a consistent criticism of mine. That said, in this video, I want to share my thoughts on this, the NuPhy Nos75, a premium QMK and VIA compatible keyboard that offers loads of internal customization in a way I wouldn't have thought possible for a low-profile keyboard. In the interest of full disclosure, this keyboard was sent to me by NuPhy, but they've had no input in the review, so I'll do my best to present my honest perspective of both the good and some of the unusual things with the Nos75. Let's get started. The Nos75 is currently the most expensive keyboard in NuPhy's lineup, starting at $199 USD for a bare bones version that includes either lubed or unlubed version of the new N1 Nano low-profile switches that we'll talk about in a minute. Aside from this, you'll also add another $19 to $24 for a complete set of NuPhy's flat NSA keycaps, and you can add other extras like a PVD steel weight for $50, or more importantly, additional plates for $15 each. NuPhy sent me one of each plate for comparison, as well as the matching frosted wrist rest, which has a nice polished metallic front bar, but would normally be a $34 add-on. On the outside, the Nos75 has a very clean and industrial design, featuring a top case with sharp front and back faces, but rounded sides that overhang the base significantly, accentuating the thinness of the keyboard. This overhang is well designed because with a 17mm front edge, the case is taller than most low-profile options I've seen, but still appears considerably thinner than standard high-profile keyboards. The body of the Nos75 is CNC'd from a solid block of aluminum and has a sand-polished finish, giving it a smooth feel, but quite a bit of heft, weighing in at 1.4 kilograms with the default FR4 plate and NSA keycaps. Overall, it has a very minimalistic and clean look, with the only logo being on the underside, where it's encircled by this new thin and hollow gas foot silicon support. I like to think of this as a Nike shock for keyboards. You'll note a small hole in the back center of the base, which allows air to escape through the USB-C connection, preventing the keyboard from being suctioned to the desk. It's also worth noting that the Nos75 is backlit with south-facing RGB LEDs that offer 39 pre-programmed effects, 32 color options, and 5 brightness levels. That said, perhaps it's the thin gap between the NSA keycaps, but I don't find the backlight to be particularly prominent, which isn't usually a problem with NuPhy keyboards. This is in contrast to the Nos75 side lights, which have been curved into the sides of the keyboard and are quite prominent. These are powered by 4 LEDs each and support 4 pre-programmed effects, 8 colors, and again 5 brightness levels. These also serve a functional purpose, with the left one turning bright turquoise if caps lock is enabled, and the right one flashing blue, white, green, or red when toggling between Windows and Mac modes, or the lighting sleep mode. Topping off the 75% 81 key keyboard are the same relatively flat PBT NSA keycaps that NuPhy uses on their Air lineup of low-profile keyboards. These have nice big central dye-sublimated legends and default Mac icons for the function row. However, it's worth noting that the complete set also comes with Windows icons for the first row and a few of the peripheral keys. NuPhy already offers quite a few color variations with these keycaps, and seems to be planning on adding even more. I have the Maya set, which has several playful Mayan-inspired characters as well, though I opted to use the basic peripheral legends in my build. These NSA keycaps have a very shallow spherical concave dip with no row-to-row height changes or sculpting. Personally, while they do feel well built, and I like the legends, I prefer a little bit more sculpting in my keys, but that isn't to be expected with low-profile keycaps. Beneath the keycaps is NuPhy's new and potentially special 3rd generation low-profile Gateron collaboration switch, the linear 50-gram force N1 Nano. I say special not because it has an ultra-smooth all-POM design, we've seen that before with low-freeze Kale collaboration switches, but because they managed to achieve a high-profile travel distance of 3.4 millimeters within this little switch by making the central pin a little bit thicker and sinking the spring inside it. This is only about 0.6 to 0.2 millimeters further than most low-profile switches, but I honestly noticed it immediately, and it makes the Nos75 feel more like a high-profile keyboard when typing. You'll also note that these N1 switches have the same pin layout as a standard mechanical keyboard switch, which is something NuPhy is trying to standardize across the industry. However, we'll have to see how that plays out. From a customer perspective, I think standardization would be great because currently several pin configurations exist for low-profile keyboards, which limits interchangeability. However, right now this linear N1 Nano switch is the first and only switch available for the Nos75 because this layout wasn't used with NuPhy's previous low-profile switches. It's also worth noting here that though the pin layouts are the same between these low-profile N1 Nano switches and the standard high-profile switches, they aren't cross-compatible because the height between the top of the PCB and where the plate clips in is different for each switch. So the N1 switches would sit too high to engage a high-profile PCB with their pins, while a high-profile switch doesn't click into the Nos75 plate. As I mentioned in the beginning, the Nos75 is designed to be modified, and while I like the external construction of this keyboard, the inside is where it really shines. There are only 4 Torx head screws connecting the top and bottom of the case, making it very quick to get access, quicker still given that NuPhy supplies a small magnetic driver with the appropriate bits for internal modifications. You'll note that these screws aren't particularly tight, because they run through silicone pads that, along with the gaskets and 2 more silicone blocks, act as force brakes between the top and bottom of the case to prevent unwanted resonance between the 2 halves. Removing the PCB plate assembly, we find a very shallow case back with a small foam layer and a thin porous silicone sheet that has a plasticky underside. Here we find 4 screws that can be removed to release the base's aluminum weight if you were to replace it with the add-on PVD steel plate. Otherwise, the base is very simple, with only a USB daughter board, because there isn't a battery version of the Nos75 available yet, so this is a wired-only keyboard. Though it's nice to note that they do include a curled cable in the package, and it does pull at 1000 Hz. Really though, the interesting part of the Nos75's construction is its Omni-Mount system. This is NuPhy's PCB mounting platform that uses these little PCB extensions to allow for one of 4 gasket mounting configurations, as well as top or bottom case mounting. The default configuration is the gasket mounted silicone socks, each of which are placed on the ends of the PCB extensions, allowing for the most deflection. Alternatively, a silicone strip can be placed over the entire extension, or small silicone beans can be placed in the center of the extensions. These come in 2 variations, a softer semi-clear bean or a firmer gray bean. Similarly, if you opt for the top or bottom case mount, NuPhy includes additional small Torx screws paired with a silicone bean-like washer that fit into the slots to secure the PCB extrudes to threaded holes in either the top or bottom of the case. I took the time to try each mounting setup with the default FR4 plate, and here's the result. Honestly, I don't hear much of a difference between the 4 gasket-mounted configurations. However, I'd say that the top case mount is a little bit louder and higher pitch, while the bottom mount was a little bit quieter again, with a lower, thockier sound. The Nos75's shallow case doesn't allow for a radical amount of flex, but this comparison between the bounciest silicone sock mount with no case foam and a stiff full foam bottom mount configuration gives you an idea of the tuning that these mount options allow. Honestly, not a bad range for a low profile keyboard. That said, an audio comparison of these two configurations indicates that a foamless case causes the stabilizers to become more prominent. This is likely because the pre-lubed PCB-mounted stabilizers penetrate through the PCB body, allowing them to transfer more sound into the case. Otherwise, the Nos75's PCB plate assembly is fairly thin to match the N1 Nano switches, and features some foam as well as a 2-layer switch pad and Gateron hot swap sockets. And, as I mentioned before, there are 5 plate options available for the Nos75. In decreasing order of specific stiffness, these are carbon fiber, aluminum, the default FR4, a glass reinforced epoxy laminate structure, then POM, and polycarbonate. Here's an audio sample of each. Generally, I found the plates to have a more prominent impact on the sound of the Nos75 than the mounting style did, with the stiffer plates having a higher pitch click, while the more flexible plates resonated at a lower and more marbly and thocky frequency. I'm still playing around with configurations to find what I like best. Next, I think I'm going to try a top-mounted POM plate with no case foam, but a Tempest tape mod to quiet the stabilizers. There's just so many possibilities to try. After using the Nos75 for a few weeks, I think it's a pretty awesome keyboard. However, it comes with a steep price tag, costing around $238 if you add a keycap set and one plate variation. That said, you can use my affiliate link to save 5% if you found this review to be helpful. The biggest drawback of the Nos75 is that there's currently only one compatible switch, the Linear N1 Nano. And while this is a very nice and innovative switch, NuPhy has said that they're waiting to see how well the Nos75 sells before they develop alternatives, so there's no guarantee that we'll get tactile or other variations anytime soon. Honestly, I think the Nos75 offers enough of a unique package to justify the price, given just how many customizations it supports. And while you can easily spend hours playing around with the different mount and plate options, NuPhy knew you would want to, and so the Omni-Mount system is actually pretty simple and quick to modify, because it's independent of the plate. Finally, a quick note on the Nos75 and its low-profile sister, the Air75 V2. There's a big difference between these keyboards, and while they are both low profile and share the same keycaps, they're targeted at very different users. The Air75 V2 is best for the classic NuPhy customer, someone looking for good off-the-shelf performance, wireless communication, and perhaps some switch swapping. While the Nos75 is more suited to someone who looks forward to internal modifications and tuning every aspect to be just right for them. So, after I ask you to please like this video if you found it helpful and subscribe if you aren't already, here's an audio comparison of the Nos75 and the Air75 V2. I think there's a pretty significant difference, but let me know what you think using the comments below. Is it worth the $100 price difference?